So you brought back to life a 1940s computer that uses water to show how money flows through the economy, which can seem an unusual choice. So why choosing such an outdated technology to talk about how we can solve today's economic challenges?
Well, I think it's a really interesting question because I think I don't consider it an outdated technology. I consider the 1940s computer to be ahead of its time. And in fact, when it was first released in the 1940s, it was the first time anyone had ever seen anything like it, trying to replicate the full workings of an economy through a big interactive visualization. And of course, 75 years later, we try to do the same thing on 3-inch mobile phone screens. And of course, it's not as good. You know, the original machine is 2 meters tall. It's an amazing physical experience to operate it and to hear it, to hear all of the water, to be able to control the flow. So what we really wanted to do is do two things. We wanted to preserve the history of the original machine because there's only 3 of the original machines left working anywhere in the world. Because it's a fantastic teaching device still for understanding kind of basic operations of the economy. But also we wanted to test what should we be using visualization for in the future? What does that look like? And so using Apple Vision Pro is a really good experiment for thinking, how can we use digital technology that's not a 3-inch screen? How can we use digital technology to understand complex systems like the economy or climate or any of these things that we're really trying to understand and kind of visualize these days? So it's a really interesting combination of history and future.
How did you first come up with the idea?
Well, it's been a long time in the making, at least 10 years, because I've been at the FT for 10 years and me and a colleague have both been very interested in the history of the original machine, and we had tried to produce different web browser versions of the machine. We thought it would be a good thing to do. But we had to wait for 7 or 8 years after the initial attempt for technology to offer a solution that would allow us to progress. So I think we were always nerds about this machine because it's a beautiful machine. If you go to the London Science Museum and see it, you just want to switch it on. Yeah.
You said that visionary simplicity is the root of innovation. What do you mean by that?
So I think we're so used to, in the last few years, are customized to a certain way of interacting with information. You know, increasingly, I mean, for the FT, more than half of our audience are coming to our website on mobile phones. And of course, what's happening is that we are shrinking our window on the world. And I think we need to start thinking slightly differently about, actually, is that the right device to be understanding all of the complex problems in the world that we have to solve? And during the course of the project, it was really interesting to read, for example, what psychologists say about how children are learning through mobile phones, that it's not necessarily a very healthy thing. It encourages a certain type of learning, but it sometimes lacks depth and it lacks emotion, and it can be quite isolating looking at content on a mobile phone. So trying something more immersive to understand complex systems seems like a really good experiment.
A few years ago, you gave a TED Talk titled Why You Should Love Statistics. Is what you said back then still relevant today? And if so, why should we love statistics?
Well, that's a really good question, because on the TED Talk, originally, the title that the TED team came up with it was, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say this, but the original working title was Why People Hate Statistics, right? And they changed it to Why People Should Love Statistics, because there's this sense that it is important, right? And it's absolutely essential, and you need to learn to love it. And I think you could say the same thing with economics too, right? Like that it's absolutely essential in the world we live in. I think a lot of what I talked about in the TED Talks was really still relevant. I think data literacy in society is still quite poor. You know, we need to think of new ways to get people interested in understanding how data affects their lives, how it relates to them. And this project for sure is a logical extension of that.